most people don't know about the First Crusade is that it exterminated the great majority of the Jewish population in the land of Israel. Yes. And what happened is that during the Crusade period, there was immigration of Jews that were exiled from the land of Israel 800 and 900 years before that. They start to come back and they replenish the Jewish community in the land of Israel. And very fast, those Jews from Spain, Sephardim, those Jews from France, Italy, Germany, and England, Ashkenazim, they became the dominant Jewish community in the land of Israel alongside a small Jewish community of the original Jews that were living in the land before the Crusade invasion, and they were called Mustaravim or Ashkelonim by the Sephardim and Ashkenazim. So this is one thing. Many people think that the Crusaders were heroic knights full of valor and justice fighting against the Muslims, but that's really not the case. A big chunk of the Crusaders were actually Franks, and they brought their attitude toward Jews, which was tolerate from one hand but cruel from the other hand, to the land of Israel. Many people think that Richard the Lionheart was a great hero. What they don't know is that actually his recapture of Jerusalem from the Muslims after the Muslims recaptured the Jerusalem from the Crusaders had a great impact on the Jews, because the Crusaders did not allow Jews to live in the cities. So whatever the Christians will take over Jerusalem, the first thing they do is to disband and throw away the Jews away from the city. So already before the First Crusade in the year 1099, the Jewish community in the land of Israel was centered mainly in the shore area. And the reason for that is because in the 11th century, there were many great wars between the Arab tribes, the Fatimids to the Arabs, and then the Fatimids to the Seljuks. This basically destroyed the Jewish community in Jerusalem, in Haifa, and also Tiberias. And this is why the yeshiva, for example, the yeshiva Gaon Yaakov, the Gaonim, they left Jerusalem already in the middle of the 11th century because they could not sustain it. The leadership of the Jews, they moved to Haifa, and later they moved to Lebanon or into Syria, because it was simply impossible for them to sustain themselves in the land of Israel, which was basically was fought over by Turks and North Africans and Arabs. So the 11th century was actually finished with a decline of the Jewish community. Most of the Jews were living in the shore area, Haifa, Cesearia, Sidon, and those areas were the first areas to attacked by the Crusaders, and this is why the calamity was terrible, because wherever the Crusader came, they massacred the Jews. In the shore area, in Jerusalem, in Ramle, the Jews, they managed to run away to Ashkelon, because Ashkelon was only conquered by the Crusaders in the year 1150, something like this. Also, they moved to other places like in Acre and also in Tyre, where the Crusaders were not so hurry to massacre the Jews, and later they allowed them to stay. In Haifa, the Jews actually, they stand up and they fought against the Crusaders for a month until they were outnumbered and overpowered, and they were massacred. Okay. More than that, the calamity was even greater, because the Jewish communities in the surrounding country, especially Egypt, was trying to help the Jews that were captured by the Crusaders. See, the Crusaders were not just massacring the Jews, they were massacring the Jews, and then when they got tired of massacring the Jews, whoever Jews was left, they basically imprisoned that Jew, and they demanded ransom from the family of the Jews. They even ransom a praying book, Torah book, even talit, tzitzit, kippah, and other stuff. They ask money, and the Jewish communities and Jewish individual donated money. They actually borrowed quite a lot of money in order to ransom their brothers. So some Jewish communities absorbed those Jews that had to run away from Jerusalem or Ramla or Haifa or other places. And I think that the big chunk of the Jews lived in Ashkelon and Gaza, but in other areas, we see, by the way, 60 years after that, about something like this, we have a Jewish traveler, Benjamin of Tudela, and he's traveling all over the Middle East, Benjamin of Tudela, and he's coming to the land of Israel, and he's actually counting how many houses of Jews you have in the land. And you see that he's finding really small number of Jews living in the land. In comparison, is counting the Jews living in Egypt, living in Syria, living in Lebanon, living in Babylonia. All right. So that was the reality of the Jews living under the Crusaders until Saladin conquered the land of Jerusalem in the year 1186, and one of the first things that he's doing is actually allowing the Jews that had to leave Jerusalem, is allowing the Jews to return to live, and the Jews hurry up to live in the city. Now there are two other things that are happening before that, which are very, very important. And one thing is that a very important rabbi from Spain come to the land of Israel. And this is something that is very, very amazing, because it comes during a time that the country is full of calamity. The Crusaders are ruling the country. They are wrestling with the Muslims. They are killing Jews. They are imprisoning Jews. And he's coming to the land of Israel. And his name was Rabbi Yehuda Levi. And he's actually the first person that basically started mystical Zionism. He used to write poems saying, "Oh, my heart is in the west. I'm in the west, but my heart is in the east. Zion, can't you see that we cry for you?" Things like that, but which up until today, it's considered to be the beginning of Zionism, the wish to live free and sovereign in your country. Yes. And then we have the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe Maimon, that come from Spain, from Morocco as well. He visited the land of Israel in 1175, 1176, about the same time that Benjamin of Tudela was in the land. And we can normally see over there there's a Jewish community in Acre. But the thing about Acre is that later in the 13th century, you see that Acre become a very big Jewish community, thankfully for a big immigration of Jews from Spain. And you need to understand that in the beginning of the 13th century, the most important Jewish rabbis, the most highest of spiritual level, were the Baalei Tosafot, which were 30. There were rabbis that were kind of like doing this project of giving commentary on some sections of the Talmud, and those rabbis, 300 rabbis from all over the world, they came to the land of Israel and settled mainly in Acre. So this is quite amazing. That basically, think about if you want to compare to today, is if Jerry Seinfeld, if Woody Allen will come and move to live in Israel, something like this. This kind of amount of amazingness. So we have this thing happening, and if you listen to my video about the 13th century, you can hear the rest about the about the crusade period, because I did an entire video every year in the 13th century. All right, so right now I'm just filling you the gap about how the land was before the 13th century, basically from the year 1099 until the year 1200. So I can tell you that it was a very difficult time for the Jews. But what happened is that already then, the beginning of the arrival of the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, which it's 1,000 years ago. Some people say that it's just a few years ago, but no, Ashkenazim and Sephardim is something that already started in the Crusade period, basically. All right, and already then they become the dominant communities in the land of Israel. This is something that is very significant. All right. Another thing that is significant about the Crusade period, and most people are completely unaware of that, is that the Crusaders basically brought the end for the Cariot movement in the Jewish world. And this is something that is huge, because anyone that is studying and learning about the Arab period in the land of Israel in the Middle East knows that the Cariot movement was actually very, very big. And when the Crusaders came to the land of Israel, they murdered a lot of Jews, and most of those Jews were probably Karayat. The idea about Karayat, Karaim in Hebrew, is that those Jews did not accept the Talmud as the Talmud and the Mishnah and the oral Torah, the oral Torah, as a final say when it comes to halacha, to the daily life rules of the Jewish faith. And this is usually fine, and it's usually not a big deal. But really, when it comes to the small points of tradition, it could get to a conflict, because there are some things that the Bible, that the Torah is telling us to do, but if you do it literally to the letter, it gets to be a bit conflicting, not only with daily life, but sometimes with other chapters of the Torah. And this is why the oral Torah and the Mishnah and the Talmud are coming to basically explain by commentary of the rabbis, saying, okay, the Torah said this, but actually, this is a solution for that, because there's so many things that you shouldn't do. There are demerits, so sometimes people, they don't know what to do exactly. So the Talmud basically give you an answer of how to do it, basically. And the Karaite were saying, no, we don't accept that. We want to do things exactly as the Torah says so, and as the Bible says so. And most of the time in Jewish life, it's not exactly a big deal. And we know that Karaite Jews married with rabbinical Jews, and most of the time they were living very peacefully, because it's only on those small, really, really small difference that you get to this point that of disagreement between the Karaim to the rabbinical Jews. But what happened is that the Crusaders murdered many of them. There were still many Karaite Jews in Egypt. And when the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, he came to the land of Israel, then he moved to Egypt. That was in about the year 1176, 75. So he actually had to deal with many Karaite Jews, but he actually approached them and basically convinced them that they should be rabbinical Jews. And he actually, I think that he is actually the person that basically united between Karaite Jews and rabbinical Jews, but it was already on the way to be done anyhow, because this separation of rabbinical Jews and Karaite Jews was something that occurred in the Arab period, but it wasn't such a big deal. The diaspora Jews, for example, were not that aware of this, I mean, I'm talking about the European diaspora. They were not that aware of this separation of Karaite and Rabbinical, they accepted Rabbinical Judaism automatically because they had a relationship with the Babylonian Jews and with the rabbis of the land of Israel. So they basically accepted what they've been told to do. So there was no problem with that. Okay, there were cases that there were some Jewish communities of Karaite Jews that were actually they had like different cults, that they got to the point that it was actually not Judaism anymore. And we actually later on in the Ottoman period, we do get approached by Karaite cults that they developed so much that actually there is no much closeness between them to the original Judaism. And this is why in some point we stopped considering them to be Jews at all. Okay, so anyhow, the Rambam, which was operating in Egypt and Israel and Syria and the land of Israel in the end of the 11th century, of the 12th century, yes. And so he basically convinced many of the Karaite Jews to be rabbinical Jews. His sons later became the leaders of the Jewish communities in the Levant, basically, yes. So this is one last important thing about the Crusade period, this crystallization of Judaism as we know it today.